Hi guys. How is everyone?
Good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm actually feeling a little under the weather.
Hi guys.
Hi. I think this is it for us tonight. There's a lot of people that are super busy.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. Oh, who just disappeared? Was that Omid?
Omid, yeah.
Oh, how are you doing, Jen?
I'm alright. How are
He
you
was
guys?
on and then he left.
Yeah, he was here and then he just left. I'm pretty good. How was your week, Jen?
It was alright. I got a lot of stuff cleared out.
Hi.
Oh, you got. What kind of stuff?
Sorry?
What kind of stuff?
Oh, well, with my anxiety, I decided to use it for the good, and I seriously decluttered.
What
like
did
for
you?
like for 5 days straight.
Oh my God! What did you declutter?
Stuff I should have got rid of a long time ago. I had stuff I had taxes from before I had kids.
What?
Yeah.
Is the family still there? Did they get decluttered?
No. Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
Okay, good.
Oh my gosh, you're too funny. Well, how does it feel? How does it feel to have done that?
It was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got rid of a lot.
I
You know
always love
what?
that feeling.
Pardon?
I always love that feeling. Did you feel your
Yeah.
anxiety actually go down?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was good.
Good for you. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yes. What are you celebrating? If it's okay to ask.
Oh, yeah, I finished the book.
What book? Were you
I
writing a
know.
book?
I finally finished it. I spent the entire weekend finishing it. And so then Tuesday, I still had like some. Oh wait, my phone is ringing. Stop ringing.
Did you write a book?
What?
Did you write a book?
I did.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yes, yeah. So some of the people that were here for the PPA party, I let them know. The PPA doesn't know.
Oh.
So I, a number of months ago, I got approached by a publisher to publish a book. And so, so that's why it's like on it. That's why sometimes when you hear me talk about it, I start my schedule at 4:30 in the morning because I have to get up at 4:30 in the morning and I start writing in the morning. And then some days I continue and write all day, whereas like other days then I work for the
She can come for 2 seconds.
the ambassador program and everything else. And so
Wow.
my schedule for the last number of months has been insanity. And
But that feels good too when you write, doesn't it?
yes. Oh my gosh. So I finished. So the whole weekend, I was like, that's it. I'm determined. I was past my deadline, so I knew I had to like finish it. And so I spent the whole weekend just finishing it. And then I got up Tuesday morning at 4:30, and I was like, that's it. Like Mike and I had tickets to the Blue Jays last night, and I was like, there is no way I'm going. Like, I'm not allowing myself to go to the game if I don't finish this.
Awesome.
So, yeah, it was yesterday afternoon. I was like, oh my God, I did it. It's done. And I forwarded it over to my publisher. And so now we have to go through the next step. So then like a copyright editor will, so what she does is she lays it out into the book format to send to the publisher. And then she also writes what's called a galley letter with the actual unedited by a copywriter. So like I'm the one that's edited it, you know what I mean? And so that then gets sent to people that will review it, because there'll be a few people that are going to write reviews on the book. So they will get that copy and they will do that. Next week, I'm supposed to see the front cover. because I sent her ideas of what that's going to look like. So that'll come. And so, yeah, I can't tell you what a relief that was, but the strangest thing has happened. And I should have known this was going to happen. It's like after I let it go yesterday, I was like, I couldn't believe how much just like sheer exhaustion hit me.
Yeah.
And then today I got up and I feel, of course, right on track. I feel extremely under the weather today.
Yeah.
So I almost feel like my body has been hanging on and letting me do this insane schedule. And now it's like, okay, now we're gonna take you down for a few days and you're gonna get sick. So I was like, so I was working with Michelle today and she was like, your energy's not nearly, and I'm like, I have to tell you, I am so exhausted. And I'm like, I feel like I'm getting sick. And I had to record all these videos today for the ambassador page. So we built a page on the PA website.
Yeah.
Because we're having so many people that are bringing outsiders onto their team. And people are like, what the hell's the ambassador program? So today we had to build this whole page. And so I had to record these videos as to like what the PPA is, what the ambassador program is, like what this stuff is.
Yeah.
And I was like building the page and I'm like, oh my God. She's like, you can do it. Just go put your lipstick on and freaking do the thing. I was like, oh my God, Michelle. I'm so tired.
Wow, that's awesome.
Like she just left. We were like working all day on just, oh my God, so much stuff.
Wow.
Like,
I'm so proud of you.
thank you. Thank you.
Awesome.
I'm super proud of myself. I can't believe I freaking did that.
Awesome.
I can't even believe that happened. It's like, it's so crazy. The book's going to be well over 200 pages. So it's going to be a nice sized book.
Good. I can't wait to read it.
Can't wait for you to read it as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. So thank you, Jen, for asking. You're very sweet. So how is everyone else? Liz, how are you? How is everything with the family? How are the kids?
We're hanging in. We're definitely hanging in. Thank you. Yeah. Yep.
I'm having
Is your daughter feeling better, Liz?
Yes.
Good.
Yes. We're just waiting till the 22nd when she gets the all clear from the surgeon, and then things will hopefully be back to normal. But thank you. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Oh my gosh, what a summer. You will never forget this summer. That's
That's an understatement. I will not ever forget this summer. No, I won't.
summer. Oh my gosh. Wow. Ahmed, how are you, my friend?
I am doing so good. It shouldn't be legal.
What?
What?
Now I need to just ask a question.
Yeah.
Yes. No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not.
What?
It's not. It's not.
What do you mean?
It's not Nicole. That was your question?
Yeah.
No, who is this person?
Ah, actually, you know what? If it's okay, I'll tell you guys the story, because the story of this person has a lot to do with the PPA impact and this PIP program.
Wow. Okay.
So you guys remember, I think it was the second day of impact when we were actually talking about boundaries. And that's when I spoke up and told you guys the story about Nicole, because her and I have always set really nice boundaries in our friendship.
Yeah.
But I was a place, and I had been there for maybe a year or two, and I mentioned it last week when we were talking about expectations, that, you know, in the back of my mind, there was always the thought of, what if Nicole and I were in a relationship? You know, what if? And, you know, it was the wrong expectation all the way, and it wasn't the fair expectation either, because we'd always set these boundaries and agreed to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I had gotten so bad that, to the point that even if somebody mentioned the name Nicole, some other Nicole, I would go off in this fantasy world of, oh, wouldn't it be nice if Nicole was here with me right now, whatever, you know, not very healthy. And that day, when I mentioned the story to you guys, and I told you guys the story, of course, now the name was on my mind, and I became preoccupied with it. When I got home, as I do every night, I go swimming it's my exercise, and then there's a jacuzzi in our building. I sit in the jacuzzi for a while and get a massage for my muscles. So that night I got home, I went swimming. I was sitting in the jacuzzi all by myself. There was nobody else in the area. All of a sudden, the door opens and this lady walks in, very young. I mean, compared to me, young, very beautiful young lady walks in, and she came straight into the jacuzzi and sat down next to me, and we started talking. Turned out she was a member of the U.S. military. She's an EOD.
A what?
An EOD, an explosive ordnance disposal. Have you ever seen the movie The Hurt Locker?
Yes.
That guy was an EOD.
Wow.
So anyway, so she was telling me the story of how she's in the Army and she's just up here in Canada visiting some family, and she's originally from Texas and she was going to go back home. Now, in the 1 week that she was here, and I swear we have a movie theater in our building, and a lot of times after my swim, I go in the movie theater and watch whatever movie they're showing. A couple of times when I went during the week, we happened to run into each other in the movie theater, and then we stayed after the movie was over and we chatted. And once, after the movie, we went out and had a bite and came back home. And so we became friends, but that was really it. We became good friends. But immediately that day when she came into the jacuzzi, the name Nicole went out of my mind.
Wow.
And I didn't notice that until a few hours later when Nicole actually messaged me saying, "Hey, something good's going on. What's going on?" And I was like, I was almost like, "Leave me alone. I'm very peaceful right now." But anyway, so we kind of in the weeks since then, we've chatted a couple of times online or whatever. Last Friday, she sent me a message and she said, "Hey, I need to talk to you. Do you have a few minutes?" I said, "Sure." So I get on. I said, "What's going on?" She goes, "Well, I just got my deployment letter. I'm leaving tomorrow morning, and I'm worried about my daughter or whatever." So I spent some time, chatted with her and everything, and gave her some ideas about the care for her daughter while she's overseas. And up to that point, I had not asked her what she does in the Army, because honestly, I was afraid of the answer, And then just before we hung up Friday night, I asked her, I said, "I need to ask you, what do you do?" And she said, "I'm an EOD." I said, "Okay." So it hit me at that point that I care about this person.
Wow.
Enough that I don't want her to be an EOD. So I told her, I said, "Okay, well, you're going away, but you need to do me a favor." And she goes, "What's that?" I said, "Every day when you wake up there, you need to send me a message and say you're okay. And every day when you get back to your base and you're going to bed, you need to send me a message saying you're okay." And she said, "Yeah, no problem." So as soon as she got to base, 24 hours later, she sent me a message of herself standing next to a helicopter in full uniform and everything, saying she's okay. So the whole weekend we were chatting, and by Sunday night, we agreed that we were in a relationship because we both cared each other about enough.
Wow. I just got goosebumps. Oh my gosh.
So it started with, coming out and just kind of letting it all out during Impact. And it came to the point where we did, right on cue, we talked about expectations last week. So I had been thinking about that. And really my worst expectation was this whole deal with Nicole. So I said, okay, I'm going to put this aside. She's my friend. That said, it's never going to be anything else. And I'm going to be open to other relationships. And sure enough, Friday night, this happened, right? So it all kind of went boom, 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 boom. And now we're chatting 2-3 times a day. If I can, I'm planning to go down for U.S. Thanksgiving because she'll be back from deployment by then.
Wow. Well, congratulations, Omid, and thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, that's wonderful. Really wonderful.
It's really, actually, if I could, I was going to ask if you guys can all say your include her in her prayers. Her name is Melissa.
I was just going to say, I would love for you to share her name. So, Melissa, we definitely will. Thank you so much. Omen, that's amazing. Wow.
There's-
Andrew, are you going to be able to follow that? How are you doing?
He's already married. He doesn't need to follow that.
Says who? I'm extremely happy for you, Element. Good for you. I love hearing stories like that, and you're such a wonderful fellow. It looks good on you, honestly and truly.
Thanks, you're kind. Maybe I'll post a picture of her in the old face messenger group we had on Facebook.
Yes, please.
Because she's not on Facebook, so they don't allow them to be on Facebook. So
Yeah. No, I completely understand. Andrew, I saw you had both your daughters come visit you.
I know, right? I would swear now and say, I love it more with an explicitive, but my God, I'm feeling fully charged today. I'm not kidding. I had them for the full weekend. I had them out in the workshop, barbecuing with them, did some projects with them, and just really made some really healthy soul connections with them. So, I mean, you can ask for more, right?
Oh my God, that's phenomenal. Phenomenal, Andrew. I'm telling you, good things are happening now. I feel like things are gonna start shifting again, you know? Because it's like look at Liz. Oh my God, yes, please. Wow. Sherry, how are you? Your daughter, my God.
My God.
Star.
It's hard for me not to not gloat, but brag. It was insane. It was such a beautiful time. She did so well. She ended up making finals.
Woo!
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So top 13 in the finals. And it was pretty exciting. You know, she really helped. Our Canadian team did really well. And now what we're looking at, it's really just one of the most supportive stories and supportive sports. You know, it's very disparate between some countries who have a lot of support and who have been doing this for a long time and have a lot, you know, the Romanians, the Chinese, just as you would think. And also Australian teams are huge and amazing, South American teams. But then the coolest story to me was a small team from India. There was only maybe 6 or 7 of them. And they hadn't been there. I guess they come 2 years ago and they didn't even have suits. Like these are competitions where girls will spend, like people will spend hundreds of dollars on their suit. Like it's big time. But they just came and represented their country, and it was just kind of like Cool Runnings. Remember that movie?
Yes.
Yeah. And they came and it was just so awesome how, like, we just, as Canadians, we just adopted them into our realm because they didn't have people like the big cheering squads. And it just made me super proud to be Canadian. And it was really interesting because, you know, just as it was such a national, I was seeing the world in such a global stage for the last few days, and I didn't really pay attention to any of the news. So I had no idea that there was all this stuff going on with Canada, and we were representing our rights and stuff like that, but the world was kind of coming back on us, in particular Saudi Arabia and such. But it really just did make me see that love is love, and that you know, I think it's built, I don't know, it's just, I think in our community we do build it into who we are, and our Canadian teams were just really loving, and it really was cool. It was cool to see, and we had a lot of loving connections with other people, don't get me wrong. It was awesome, but I was very AWOL, and now trying to get myself back on track, right? Back into the world, and going, oh my gosh, that was a month of my life basically, and now we're back and getting ready for the next one. But I was a pretty proud mama.
Amazing. Well, congratulations to your daughter, and congratulations to you. I mean, that's a huge commitment on your part, support, and it's a lot. So yeah.
It's a lot. It's really cool. Like the Canadian team's been invited to go to Tokyo as well, and to work with the Japanese. So I know. And you know what? I have to say, Quinn's 11, and she was only a 1.5 points behind the leader. So it's like, okay, it's interesting because I knew what your kids turn you on to a world that you had no idea existed. I wasn't an interest I would have ever followed. It wasn't a rabbit hole I would have ever gone down. And so I'm just so passionate about helping her and helping all the mentors that she has in her lives, the young women and the older women who have really been the pioneers in the sport. And now they're helping the young girls. And, you know, when she's 18, it'll be a totally different story. You know, she could be an Olympian. And what does that look like as a mom and as a family and as a community and as a country? So it's really cool position to be in, I have to say. Had no idea. I still call it rehearsal instead of practice. So there you go. Anyway, happy to be back. Sorry I was AWOL. Sorry I was not focused.
You're all good. You're back, and we're here now, and we're going to get going. Because my God, I would just love nothing more than to continue chatting with all of you, especially with all the good news. But we really should do what we came here to do today, and that's talk about boundaries, because they're ginormous. You guys, of course, know because you did take the leadership program, so you have learned a lot about boundaries, but. Boundaries and why this is workshop number 9, why it's left for so much later in the 12-week program is because of just how big it is and how sometimes a lot of people have misconceptions when it comes to boundaries. All of us have. All of us. Like it's ridiculous, the boundaries that are passed down to us as we grow up. So one of the first questions I think it would be really important when you guys start your own workshops is to really ask people within your group why do they think boundaries are important, because there are so many that don't realize that these boundaries have to exist and just how many boundaries there are. Okay, so that's a great question to start things off. So boundaries defines what is me and what is not me. It literally, that is the simplest form of it, okay? It is the definition of where I end and someone else begins. A boundary is a limit that promotes integrity and empowers us to determine how we'll be treated by others. And I think that is a key thing right there. The fact that it promotes integrity and empowers you. And a lot of people don't realize that is how important a boundary is, that it is actually promoting something like integrity in your life, okay? Boundaries brings order to our lives, and as we learn to strengthen our boundaries, we gain a clearer sense of ourselves and our relationship to others. With good boundaries, we can have the wonderful assurance that comes from knowing we can and will protect ourselves from the ignorance, meanness, and thoughtlessness of others, because all of that exists. It does, right? There are so many people that push our boundaries, that try to disintegrate our boundaries, whatever it is. And that is why, the very beginning, we talk about toxic people, for you to get here to realize where these boundaries have to go. Okay, so you have to understand those people before we can get here. So, like any fence, boundaries require maintenance. Some people are like ivy and keep trying to crawl over or through our boundary. These are a lot of those toxic people, and it's very tiresome. But if we let these people stay in our lives, we must keep pruning them and throwing the behavior weeds out of our yard. Okay? So that's something that's very important. Okay. Oh, poor Liz disappeared. Okay, so what are the types of boundaries? Because like I mentioned when we first started this, there are several areas where boundaries apply. So the first one that we're going to talk about is material boundaries. Determine whether you give or lend things, such as your money, car, clothes, books. I mean, this can go on and on and on. Anything that belongs to you and you are willing to share. So that is an easy one. That's a very easy boundary for us to start with. But there are boundaries with these things. And a lot of times there are people that just so willy-nilly just lend everything out. Like, oh, I'm going to lend money. I'm going to lend my car. I'm going to lend my clothes. Even books. I don't know if you're anything like me, but there are some books where no one is allowed to borrow them. They're kind of like your Bibles. They're, like there's so much attachment to that particular book. So I'm always the person where it's like, no, you can't have this one. I'll just order you a new one. I'm just like, this one means so much to me. I'll just get you your own. Okay. But it's true. We have to make sure those boundaries exist. The next one is physical boundaries. This pertains, of course, to your personal space. privacy, locked doors. That has to happen with these physical boundaries. And body, it comes even with nudity. Some people are, you know, it's like, what am I going to show and what am I not going to show? These boundaries differ from each person. Some like to give a handshake, whereas if you're like me and like more open-minded, I love to give hugs. But I also make sure that I respect other people's boundaries. When someone puts a handshake out and I am that person that wants to hug them, I'll always be like, oh my God, no, I'm a hugger, but it's up to you. And some people are like, oh my God, I'm not. I'm like, and I get it. And that's perfectly fine. You have told me where your physical boundary is, and I'm going to respect that. I'm not just going to throw myself on top of you and hug you if you're like, oh my God, this is extremely uncomfortable. There is, one of Michael's friends, my eldest son, one of his friends, he lives with us, and he has lived with us for about the last 2 years, but it's off and on. He's very off and on. So he'll be here for weeks on end, and then John will kind of disappear, or he'll just be here for a weekend, or he'll disappear, or sometimes he's here for 2 months. So we never know with John. But John, I feel like he's a person that has been undiagnosed with Asperger's. And he is very much a person where his boundaries are physical contact can't exist. Like it just doesn't. Like he doesn't hug, he doesn't like to touch, he doesn't like anything like that. He's a quirky kid, right? Well, he's not a kid, he's in his 20s now. But John, being that he has been around us since Michael and him went to school, he's gotten to the point where I will say to him sometimes when it's like his birthday or it's like Christmas or like something special has happened in his life, I will always ask permission. John, is it okay if I give you a hug for that? And he's like, you're the only one that gets to do that, but yes, I will allow it. You know what I mean? Because now he knows we have that relationship and I'm not trying to take anything from him. I'm not trying to harm him in any way. It is just a loving thing that I want to do. And so now that physical boundary for us has started to come down. So people's physical boundaries can even change as well. That happens in relationships. We go from in the beginning, you're just dating and friendship, to all of a sudden, now the physical boundary comes down, you take your clothes off. It's like these boundaries can shift and change in different relationships, okay? Mental boundaries. This appeals to your thoughts, values, and opinions. Are you easily suggestible? Do you know what you believe? And can you hold on to your opinions? Can you listen with an open mind to someone else's opinion without becoming rigid? If you become highly emotional, argumentative, or defensive, you may have weak emotional boundaries, okay? So our mental boundaries are all of those things. It's, are we easily suggestible? What are our mental boundaries here? Emotional internal boundaries. This refers to being able to distinguish your emotions and responsibility for them from someone else's. Okay, it's like an imaginary line or force field that separates you from others. So healthy boundaries prevents you from giving advice, blaming, or accepting blame. They protect you from feeling guilty for someone else's negative feelings or problems and taking others' comments personally. So this happens all the time. It's like other people have comments and all of a sudden we're taking them so personally, or someone is completely miserable and we take on that and we become miserable. So we have to make sure that we have emotional internal boundaries happening here. High reactivity suggests weak emotional boundaries. Healthy emotional boundaries require clear internal boundaries, knowing your feelings and your responsibilities to yourself and others. And a lot of times that one is kind of hard, especially when it comes to family members. So anyone else that is going through stuff in the family, and we're always that, right? Liz is like, yep, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's that emotional internal boundary. All of a sudden you take it all on yourself. So you need to distinguish yours from theirs and take responsibility for yours and not theirs, okay? Sexual boundaries. This is a big one. This boundary is important to protect your comfort level with sexual touch and activity. What, where, when, and with whom. And this also comes down to this is a massive boundary that's happening in our society right now. With the whole Me Too movement, that's what these sexual boundaries are. So this existed and has existed mostly in a lot of ways for women. and, you know, having different situations where men were crossing that sexual boundary in places where it shouldn't be happening. So that's why I really, you know, I kind of wondered if I should put that one in this workshop, but I felt with the whole Me Too movement, it's extremely important for us to realize this is a massive boundary and it should not be crossed. Okay, so spiritual boundaries. This boundary is the understanding who we are and core values we have created for ourselves. Okay, these core values create who we are and what we do on a daily basis. These central beliefs shape our choices in jobs, fun, and even our mates. Okay, so these are our beliefs that we have in our core values. Hi, sweetie pie. Hi, honey. Okay, so now that we've kind of gone through, we have 6 boundaries that are very normal and exist on a daily basis. So now that we know what those are, let's talk about some unhealthy boundaries, because this is pretty much when we talk about boundaries where we a lot of people kind of fall down when it comes to their boundaries is because they have unhealthy ones that exist. So there is a difference between healthy and unhealthy boundaries. We all have boundaries and we all need to respect each other's wishes, but sometimes it's not always easy as it sounds, and it's not. Especially those who don't know how to set and establish healthy boundaries. And there's a lot of people that do that. Unhealthy boundaries consist of not respecting others' wishes, ignoring their privacy, and doing things that cross the line and push the other person away. In any relationship, boundaries need to be discussed and agreed upon to take responsibility for. And something we need to remember, I've already mentioned at the beginning. Oh my gosh, Liz is like bombarded by both of the kids now. It's adorable. Oh my God, so cute. So what we need to make sure that we understand as well is why I say boundaries need to be discussed and agreed upon to take responsibility is we need to remember in any relationship as well, boundaries are going to shift and change all the time. So it should be something that is always discussed, especially as relationships change. Like I know, for instance, you know, just bringing up children myself, my boundaries have shifted and changed with them as they've gotten older. You know, in the beginning, when they're Liz's grandchildren's age, you are like fully in on their boundaries. You make all their decisions. You're emotionally helping them. You're doing everything for them. Your boundaries very different. Then as they start to get older, what happens is they start to become more independent. Now, all of a sudden, you're not bathing them and dressing them. A privacy boundary is now existing. So it's like in relationships, these constantly have to shift and change. And this happens with adults as well. You know, anyone getting into a relationship, your boundaries are going to shift and change. In work situations, they're going to shift and change. So we always have to be very aware that these are things that need to be discussed and agreed upon. And don't just take the first boundary that you guys agree on, and then that's it for the entire relationship. In order to communicate clearly, we need a strong sense of self. Okay? Without boundaries, you will never gain critical self-worth and empowerment necessary for a long-lasting, healthy, respectful relationships. So, unhealthy boundary examples. We talked about a lot of these in Impact. These are really important to make sure that you are giving these examples when you're talking to people from the PPA. Because again, there's going to be some people that don't understand or don't even know that these are unhealthy. Talking at an intimate level at the first meeting. And that is my favorite one to put first. Because how many people do you know that the moment they meet you, they tell you everything about them? That is actually an unhealthy boundary. It shouldn't exist. When my Nana got quite older, when she started to get into her late 70s or 80s, we would be out and I would take her out and we would run into someone or I would introduce her to someone. And within minutes, my Nana would be telling her whole health history, you know, exactly what she's doing. Like she would go to intimate levels with that person when that person has just met them. Those boundaries shouldn't exist. Okay. Next is falling in love with a new acquaintance. So right away, it's like they are everything to you. And Yeah, falling in love with a new acquaintance. I had this happen with a girl at work where, you know, we got to know each other at work and she kept asking me, we should go for brunch. We should go for brunch. My husband, your husband, we should all go for brunch. And so I said, okay, I'd gotten to know her a bit. She seemed nice. And so I'm like, what is brunch, right? I love brunch. Let's just go for brunch. So we went for a Sunday brunch and it was lovely and it was fine. And then I went back into work the next week. And then about Wednesday, she says to me, so what are you guys doing this weekend? Like, did you want to do something this weekend? Are we going to go for brunch again? You want to go for dinner? You want to do something? And I was like, oh, well, thank you so much. But like, I have plans for this weekend. And so like right away, and then that continued for weeks where she was just like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? So right away, she like fell in love with this relationship right away, but then wanted it all. And that boundary was too much. And so when she came at me like that, I literally did this. I was like, whoa, this is too much. You are crossing a boundary in our relationship too fast. Okay. Number 3 is going against personal values or rights to please others. And sometimes that happens a lot. It's like you're willing to throw someone under the bus, you know, because you're wanting to please someone else. That happens a lot with gossip. It happens at work a lot. Touching a person without asking, not allowed. It's the same with what I said. I'm a hugger, but it's up to you. And you ask before you do something. Allowing someone to take as much as they can from you. That is a taker. This is a toxic relationship. Letting others direct your life. And that happens sometimes in relationships. And this has a lot to do with self-confidence. And this is where your self-confidence becomes that boundary meter for you because you let others direct exactly what you're doing. Falling apart so someone will take care of you. That goes back to toxic people. Workshop number 3, we talked about that. That is a toxic relationship. If they're always just falling apart so you'll take care of them, that's actually also crossing a boundary here. Accepting food, gifts, touch, or sex that you do not want. Not great. Being overwhelmed by a person preoccupied with thoughts of them. Okay, so this is pretty much a stalker. This is a boundary that shouldn't exist. Letting others describe you really and or define who you are. Okay, again, goes back to those toxic relationships. And this is where these boundaries, this is why in the beginning it was so important for us to learn about these toxic people, to realize that what they're doing is crossing unhealthy boundaries. Okay, so ignored boundary signs. So when these things are unhealthy, these are things that we start to ignore. So you can tell boundaries are being ignored if you are experiencing one or more of the following challenges. Okay, this is where people are just completely ignoring things. Excessive togetherness. This unhealthy boundary exists when someone expects everyone to do everything together and no one is allowed to deviate from the family or the group norms, as well as expecting everyone is to think, feel, and act the same way. The results will be people pulling away and ending the relationship. It was a perfect example I gave you of my coworker, who it was like we had to have excessive togetherness. And sometimes this exists in families where it's like, you know, we have to come to dinner every single Sunday. Everyone has to do this. You can't deviate from that. We always must be doing this. That's crossing a boundary. Those things shouldn't exist. Excessive togetherness. And a lot of people don't realize that this is boundary crossing because it exists in a lot of families all the time. And sometimes this exists within girlfriends. And we see a lot of this in teenage girls, that happens, where they're all in a group and the group has to do every single thing together. They're not allowed to deviate on their own. And that's where kind of the whole mean girl thing comes in. When they don't, when someone deviates out, done with them. It's like that is actually an unhealthy boundary, okay? Disassociation. This sign occurs when someone is pulling away and blanking out during a stressful, emotional event. This results in denial of any feelings and being completely out of touch with reality. Now, I want to make sure that you guys understand that disassociation, there are some people where emotionally traumatic things happen. A death in your family. And to go through the grieving process, you have to disassociate yourself. Sometimes people pull back. I just need some alone time to get through this. That is not what I am talking about here, because that I just referred to is someone that is taking a time out to deal with their emotions and grief. Disassociation, that boundary, is when you're completely blanking out and you're in denial that it's even happening and you're checking out. And sometimes this exists in friendships, in family, in work situations where things just get too much and they just like, that's it, I'm out. And then what's even worse is this boundary is they come back like nothing has happened. Okay, that is disassociation that I'm talking about. So excessive detachment. This occurs when a person in a group, family, or relationship isn't able to establish any emotions or feelings towards others. Everyone is totally independent from everyone else, and there doesn't seem to be anything to hold you and them together in a healthy union. Okay? Excessive detachment, and sometimes that does happen. Victimhood, or someone playing the martyr. Oh my gosh, that one, like, I gotta tell you, I don't know what sometimes is worse, is someone being the martyr or someone being the victim. Like, they're both one and the same, but oh my gosh, the martyr is a really hard one for me. This sign occurs when a person identifies themselves as a violated victim and becomes overly defensive to ward off further violation. So their boundaries are just so big here. This also happens when a person allows themselves to be victimized in order to play the martyr, okay? So they allow that victimhood to happen so they can play the martyr and you can rescue them. See how unhealthy these boundaries are? First of all, they push every single person away, or they play the victim to bring everyone close to them. Chip on their shoulder. When someone has not dealt with a past anger issue due to lack of respect or ignored rights, generally go through life with a chip on their shoulder. This sign is a clear indication of unhealthy boundary issues. And there are many of us that know those people. They always have that chip on their shoulder. They're always just like angry with everything, always complaining. That is such an incredibly unhealthy boundary that is existing. Aloofness or shyness. This can be a result of insecurity from real or perceived experiences of being ignored or rejected in their past. This feels like a violation of your efforts to expand or stretch your boundaries to include others in your space. Once rejected, you take the defensive posture to reject others before they reject you. Can you see how unhealthy this boundary is here? This keeps you inward and unwilling or fearful of opening up your space to others. And that does happen. That boundary is so blocked off. When we talk about it, when you talk about people that are like this, the aloofness, the shyness, we talk about that person has a lot of walls. Like, you're literally just describing what their boundaries are, right? Okay, cold and distant. This builds walls or barriers to ensure that others do not permeate or invade your emotional or physical space. This too can be a defense due to past hurts and pain. This stance is a declaration that I've drawn the line, which I dare you to cross. It is a way to keep others out and put them off. And there are a lot of people that are very cold and distant. And I have to tell you, we had a leader, a past leader before, and we spoke about this. I spoke about, you keep a lot of distance with yourself. And I brought it up after we had the boundaries workshop. And I brought it up with this person and I said, I need you to be very aware of number 7, because you continually give a cold and distant feeling of who you are. And that boundary is going to prevent people from coming in. I need you to be aware that you are doing this. Number 8 is smothering. This unhealthy boundary is the result of jealousy, fear, and insecurity from a person. The insecurity may stem from a past life experience. A person smothering can make another feel like they are being strangled, held too tightly, and have no freedom to breathe on their own. And this can exist sometimes in the parent-child relationship. It can also happen within really, it can happen in any situation, to tell you the truth, because I even had a friend who was very smothering. And I think I've mentioned it with you guys here before, where she, continually, every time I saw her, she would talk about how much I didn't get together enough with her. And she was just constantly smothering me. And it was always feeling like they're strangling me. Lack of privacy. This is present when it seems that nothing a person thinks, feels, or does is their own business. You are expected to report to others in the family or group all details, feelings, reactions, opinions, relationships, and dealings with the outside world. This behavior makes a person feel that nothing they experience can be kept in the privacy of their own domain. And everyone, it doesn't matter what relationship you have, privacy does need to exist. Even, it comes down to, there are some relationships, it was like, well, we don't keep secrets from each other. In a husband-wife relationship, and they say, we know each other, all of our own passwords. I don't necessarily agree with all of that. I feel as human beings, we should have our own privacy. Not everything needs to be shared. It's not that we're hiding anything. It's just that boundary should exist, that I am still my own independent person. You are, and then we have chosen to be together. Not that we've chosen to give up our independence or our privacy. Okay? So that is a huge boundary. And so I always, when people tell me things like that in their relationships, I'm always like, there's a part where you still need the privacy and independence of your own. So you have to make sure that this isn't an unhealthy boundary. Okay, so how do you? We've just talked about all of these things that are unhealthy boundaries and how they are existing and why they're existing, but how do you even establish healthy boundaries? How does that happen? Setting and sustaining boundaries is a skill. Unfortunately, it's a skill that many of us don't learn. We might pick up pointers here and there from experience or through watching others, but for many of us, boundary building can be a challenging one, especially if you come out of any sort of relationships where all the boundaries were crossed, okay? Having healthy boundaries means knowing and understanding what your limits are. So here are a few ways to create those healthy boundaries. So number one, realize you have the right to personal boundaries. There are a lot of people that don't even realize they have the right to it. And I want to go back to the lack of privacy. And when I talked about in a relationship of any way, that privacy needs to exist. You have the right, even in a marriage, to your own privacy. Okay? You not only have the right, but you must take responsibility for how you allow others to treat you. It has to be your responsibilities. Your boundaries act as filters, permitting what is acceptable in your life and what is not. If you don't have boundaries that protect and define you as a strong sense of identity, you tend to derive your sense of self-worth from others, and they're not yours. So to avoid this situation, A, set clear and decisive limits so that others will respect them. And I know for myself in my relationship that has taught me the most about everything in life, and that was my toxic relationship with my mother, pulling away from her, going back into this relationship, I was the one who set very clear boundaries now. Very clear. There was no more of this exchanging everything that was going on in my life. I didn't give her all of that stuff. The boundaries were created to protect myself from not being hurt on a regular basis. So we have to do that. And sometimes our most intimate relationships that we have are the hardest ones we have to set these boundaries. Okay? Be willing to do whatever it takes to enforce them. And that's one of the hardest ones there. Are you willing to have that hard conversation with someone? Are you willing to go there? Just recently with my youngest son, Hayden, there were some boundary issues that were happening with him. Listen, we all shift and grow and everything else. And on the weekend, I had to have a really hard conversation with him. We had to sit down and put the stuff on the table. So those boundaries were created again because boundaries were starting to get crossed. And it's we have to have those hard conversations. No one wants to have them, but we have to. So that's why B is be willing to do whatever it takes to enforce them. It's getting comfortable with being uncomfortable because it's your right. Okay? Interestingly, it's been shown that those who have weak boundaries themselves tend to violate the boundaries of others more. So when no boundaries exist, they're constantly going against yours. Okay? So number 2, recognize that other people's needs and feelings are not more important than your own. Okay? Traditionally, many women thought that the needs of their husbands and children were more important than their own. This used to exist. This existed in our society. This is not only untrue, but it can undermine the healthy functioning of the family dynamic. And at the end of the day, a lot of parents still do this. We're constantly crossing those boundaries because everyone else is more important than what is happening with us. That does happen. It's unhealthy for that to exist. You're also showing that unhealthy boundary to the people you're raising. So that's just how incredibly unhealthy it is. If a person is worn out mentally and physically from putting everyone else's needs first, they deprive anyone else from being fully engaged in their own lives. Instead, they should encourage all relationships to contribute to the whole as well as take care of themselves. And that is incredibly important. Okay, learn to say no. I would have to say from my own experience, when I turned 40, I fell in love with the word no. And it literally became, no is a sentence. And it's an empowering word to have. So many of us are prone to being people pleasers and often put ourselves out disadvantaged by trying to accommodate everyone else. And how many of us have done this? We've all done this. Every single person that is in this workshop has done this hundreds of times in their life. We do this. We don't want to be selfish or let anyone down. So we put our personal needs on the back burner and agree to do things that may or may not be beneficial to our well-being. Actually, a certain amount of selfishness is necessary to have healthy personal boundaries. Learning to say no eliminates trying to please others at your own expense. Because like how many times, oh, something's coming in here, booyah, oh, I love it. Sherry's talking, booyah. It's so true. It's so true. And that's the thing. We do this time and time again. It's like, oh, I don't want to say no, like I'm going to hurt their feelings if I don't, want to go to their party or whatever it is. No, it's not going to hurt their feelings. They're going to respect you more for saying no than doing something you don't want to do. It's okay. And if people in your life are going to unfriend you or not want you around because you've said no by putting yourself first, then that's not a friend at the end of the day. So we need to remember these things. And I know I'm saying it, and it sounds so simple, but it isn't simple. It's hard to do this part. It's hard to say no, but we have to because we are the most important people in our lives, okay? Learning to identify the actions and behaviors you find unacceptable. Always let others know when they have crossed the line, acted inappropriately, or disrespected you in any way. Do not be afraid to tell others when you need emotional and physical space. Allow yourself to be who you really are without pressure from others to be anything else. So, of course, guys, you can see why this workshop is number 9. This is a lot of big stuff here. This is massive stuff that there are people that go their entire lives that are not able to, one, say no, that are not able to identify the actions and behaviors that are unacceptable with other people. They let people disrespect them. They find out someone's badmouthed them and they don't say anything about it. All of these things, these are the things where I will continually say, you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. These are never going to be hard. Michelle and I have been working together for months and months and months. And a few weeks ago, we had a thing that happened and she was talking about one thing and I was like, nope, this is like unacceptable. Like I knew it was. I felt where she was coming from. I didn't agree with it. And so I sat with it for like a few minutes and then I was like, okay, I have to have this conversation because if I don't, it will then become, I will resent what she said. And then that turns into, it's a snowball effect, isn't it? Where all of a sudden it's like, well, I'm not going to do that for her because I didn't like that she did that. So I sat down and I'm like, Michelle, we need to have a conversation. And she's like, okay. And I'm like, and this is not an easy conversation to have, but we must, for myself to go forward and for you to go forward. And so I put everything on the table. We had a little bit of a heated thing back and forth. And then it was like a matter of like, then we came to this incredible place of respect for each other and talked it out. And then I was like, okay, are we good? And she's like, we're more than good. And I'm like, most excellent. Now we can move forward. And then it was even the next day we brought it up again. She was like, Heidi, I have more respect for you now for bringing that up because I know how uncomfortable that must have been for you. But for us to work together, we have to have these uncomfortable conversations. I'm like, hell yeah, I cannot go forward anymore in life with having those feelings with people. So it's like these things have to exist, and they're the hardest things as adults and as human beings that we have to do. It's very hard. Okay, number 5, trust and believe in yourself. You are the highest authority on you and knows what you need, want, and value. Believe that. Guys, you know this better than anyone else. Learn to not let anyone else make the decisions for you. Healthy boundaries makes it possible for you to respect your strength, abilities, and individuality as well as those of others. An unhealthy imbalance occurs when you encourage neediness or are needy, want to be rescued or are the rescuer, or when you choose to play the victim. Okay, so you need to completely know who you are and what is the behaviors that you're doing. Constantly, we have awareness. It's the doorway to everything, that awareness. Okay, so tools. Now I've just told you the healthy boundaries that we have to create. Tools to create these healthy boundaries. How do we get there? How do we do this? So here are a few tools to help you create these. Okay, number 1, words. Words are one of the most powerful things when you think about it. Words can inspire us, motivate us, can help us fall in love, can break our heart. Words are incredibly, incredibly powerful. You can create good protective boundaries with words. The most basic boundary setting word is no. That's it. No. It lets others know that you exist apart from them and that you are in control of you. So you need to figure out the words that are going to create those boundaries for you. So no, or it's like, I need to have a conversation with you. I am not comfortable with what's just happened. You are setting that boundary. I'm not comfortable here. I'm letting you know exactly what is going on with me. I'm not comfortable. So these words that you are going to start using in your vocabulary to create those boundaries. Okay? Geographical distance. Guys, this works. My mother lives in Stevensville. Geographical, where's that? It's just past Port Erie. So geographical distance, physically removing yourself from a situation can help maintain boundaries. And so sometimes you have to do this. Sometimes you literally are like, I need to go for a walk. I need to just have some distance. Geographical distance is a boundary that you can use to get through, as long as you're not running away. That is not what I'm saying here. It's just giving that boundary. Some relationships can trigger unhealthy boundaries, and the only way to have any healthy boundary is to have distance between you. Okay? A geographical boundary. Time. That's number 3. Taking time off from a person or project can be a way of regaining ownership over some out of control aspect of your life when boundaries need to be set. Take responsibility for how you're feeling and give yourself permission to reset how you're feeling. So sometimes we do. Sometimes we need to walk away. Sometimes we need to say, listen, I just need 24 hours with this. You've created a boundary with time to figure out how you want to proceed with it, okay? Whatever is happening, time is okay. Again, I will keep saying it over and over again. As long as you are not using this as denial, you are taking a time out, and then when you come back to the situation, it's like nothing has happened. That can't exist. It needs to just be used as a tool. A boundary is set for you to figure out what it is. A timeout can work. Emotional distance. Emotional distance is a temporary boundary to give your heart the space it needs to be safe. This is beneficial after a breakup or during a grieving process. However, this boundary should never be a permanent way of living, okay? So sometimes you do. Sometimes you just need to check out, actually give your emotions some time. Okay, and it does. It's like sometimes it is. It's that breakup. It's the grieving process. It's, you know, something really bad has happened, and so you just need for your emotions to just take a temporary boundary. Okay. Other people. All of us have people we trust in our lives. Learn to depend on others to help set and keep boundaries. Creating boundaries always involves a support network. So that is a big part of your emotional toolbox. It's having those people that you trust in your life that can, one, help hold you accountable to things, people that you can go and talk with to figure out things. So that is actually, and a lot of people I think don't realize that other people can be a tool to help us set boundaries. Okay? Because sometimes you just need someone else's perspective as well. So always remember that. So these are incredible tools. Did someone say something? No? Okay. Learning the 3 S's to healthy boundaries. So I love these 3 S's a lot because if you think about all of the other workshops, it all comes together here. So learning to enforce boundaries takes practice and patience, yet it can be done and lead us to a healthier and happier life. The 3 S's to healthy boundaries is a great way to remind yourself regularly. So number 1, when that boundary is crossed, speak up. Use your words. The key words can help create healthy boundaries. So no, yes, don't, I will, I won't. All of these words, you're going to speak up. You're not just going to let someone cross it and not say anything and be hurt, you know, disrespected, whatever it is. You have to speak up. Speak up is the first S. The next one, and this is the hard one, is you have to stand up. Take responsibility for what is your truth and what's right. Take a deep breath and calmly repeat desire and then state consequences, okay? So you're speaking up. It's like someone is screaming at you, you know, they're crossing that boundary. They're coming at you with an aggressive tone, whatever it is. It's like, no, hold on a second. You spoke up. Now you're going to take responsibility for that. I am very uncomfortable with the fact that you are screaming at me. So if you, now, consequence, if you continue yelling at me, I'm going to need to leave this situation until you calm down. So you've spoke up to stop them. You've now said what your desire is. And now you've said the consequence if they continue. Okay. Number 3, the last one is step back. So speak up, stand up, step back. Create a physical boundary of distance and space and carry it out. Previously stated in the consequence. So whatever that is, if it's just that I'm going to leave, we're going to need to put some distance, whatever it is, it's the stepping back. By stepping back, it puts the responsibility of the behavior back onto the person initiating it and creates a sense of self-respect for the new boundary setter. Always remember, respect begets respect. When we respect ourselves, others begin to respect us in return. Okay, so we have to do that. So it's an easy way when those situations happen. It's like, okay, I have to speak up. How am I going to speak up? I got to stand up for myself. I'm going to say my desire, the consequences, and then do it. Step back. Whatever those consequences, if that person continues to push back on that boundary, step back. You need to take time out. I need to go and speak to someone else. Whatever the consequence was that you're going to bring up, you need to actually follow through. Okay? Anyone have any questions on all those? Is anyone like, I'm feeling very uncomfortable with all of this boundary setting I have to do now? Oh my gosh. Okay. So, yes.
I was just gonna say it's awesome and so like right to the gut.
Is it? You're feeling that, Sherry?
Yeah, totally. It's great and awful all at
Amazingness.
once. Yeah.
Amazingness.
Yeah.
Do you struggle with any of the things that we've spoke about so far?
Oh my goodness, yes, absolutely. Boundary setting for sure. And one of it too, even because like what I'm learning more about even just having ADHD as an adult and as a child, as anyone who has ADHD, we even struggle like clinically beyond that. And so like I'm seeing myself replaying the relationships, and I'm now starting to go, oh, that's that kind of relationship. No, this is my boundary. And it just is so, you feel so peaceful when you set it and when you allow yourself to stay within your boundary, and it's great.
Yes, it is. But I have to tell you, like, all of this, like, any of us here that says, you know, no, I'm really great with boundaries is lying. Like they are, because like as human beings, we are constantly tested on a regular basis by people coming in and out of our lives with different personalities, different backgrounds. And so our boundaries are tested constantly. And do we all, you know, stand up and it's like, you know, like, am I like phenomenal with boundaries? No, like there are lots of different boundaries where like, I have to tell you, like my heart is way too freaking big on a daily basis to not to fall down when it comes to boundaries, because, you know, I am always the one that, you know, lets the victims come in. And it's like more and more, especially with the PPA, I've had to create ginormous boundaries with different things. And that's been very hard for me to do, and I've struggled with it. So listen, guys, like this, like boundaries is a hard one. It is. And it's something you constantly, and I think that's why the 3 S's are so important. And I think about the 3 S's a lot when things come up. So it's like, definitely try as much as you can. If there is something, a tool you are going to take from this workshop, take that tool and remind yourself of those 3 S's on a regular basis, because you all know what it feels like when your boundaries have been crossed. Okay. So internal boundaries. I want to talk about the boundaries within ourselves now. And internal boundaries is a limit we set with ourselves regarding our own rules, what we think is right or wrong, what we allow or don't allow regarding our personal thoughts. Because we got to remember, guys, our personal thoughts. How many times do we cross boundaries with our personal thoughts, the negative thoughts that come in, words and behaviors, right? If we set limits for ourselves and do not follow through with them consistently, it is an indication that our internal boundaries are damaged. Okay, so examples: failing to follow through with the goals we set for ourselves. All of us do this. There are so many times we set goals for ourselves. I mean, think about the amount of times you've set a weight loss goal for yourself. You know, you're going to exercise goal for yourself. You know, I'm going to network more. Whatever the goals are. I mean, Jen set an amazing goal for herself and did all that decluttering in that. But what if after day 2, she gave up on it? Does anyone else know? Because she made that internal one with herself. She made that boundary with herself. Okay. So that's how we sometimes fail. Failing to keep the promises we make to others regarding our behavior. And 3 is continued choices that are causing negative consequences to our health, personal relationships, or finances. And I want to go back to failing to keep promises, because failing to keep promises, this is a boundary that we as human beings fail on a regular basis. And there is one promise that we make to ourselves every single morning, almost every single morning, depending on the day of the week, that we as human beings cross that boundary and fail it. And that is, we set the alarm. We set our alarm every single morning. We make a promise to ourselves, I'm going to get up at 4:30. And then what do? You snooze, right? We just crossed an internal boundary to ourselves. We did that. We failed to keep that promise to ourselves. And so I constantly, I've told this one to the PPA like a number of times. And I've said to them, I want you, if you're going to develop the boundaries in your life, this is a perfect example of how you can start. Don't hit snooze. If you have made that promise to yourself, keep it. Keep that promise. Because the more you can start keeping these things to yourself, the easier you can start doing it with other people. So how do we make sure our internal boundaries are healthy and secure? Number one, learn to recognize your own emotional responses. Pay attention if you are consistently reacting negatively to situations. These are important cues to emotions that haven't been dealt with and are bubbling up in similar circumstances. Journaling, of course, can help you with these. I will always bring that up. So ask yourself these questions. Why am I so angry when this happens? Why? Why am I so angry? Why does this situation always make me sad? You have to start asking yourself these questions. If constantly these emotions are coming up, which is stopping you from keeping any of your internal boundaries with yourself, guys, we've got to start understanding why that's happening. And that's the hardest thing about what's going on with us. But if it's like, if you are like every time someone doesn't load the dishwasher properly, you are getting so frustrated every single time that happens. I think it's time to actually start asking yourself the question, why do I even care? The dishes are still getting washed and I'm not doing them. Why do I keep getting frustrated about it? So you guys, you have to start asking yourself all of these questions. Become aware of how other people react to you. If people are reacting the complete opposite to what you meant, this is a chance for exceptional insight. Take a step back and pay attention to your own verbal or nonverbal cues that you may be giving. This simple process can help you discover why people are responding negatively, positively, or strongly towards you. Have you ever noticed sometimes those people where, you're speaking with them and you feel like, you're telling them, how they should be doing something, and then someone reacts automatically with their back up? If this is continually happening all the time or with these people, I think it's time to start looking internally at your own boundaries. What is the tone that I'm actually saying this? And I actually did this experiment with my husband. I started to ask him, because I would notice like his back would go up with certain things. And I said to him, I have to ask you a question. How am I coming across to you? How am I coming across that your back just went up? Is it that you just don't like to hear what I've just said? Or is it there's something that I'm not aware of? And he's like, well, to tell you the truth, it's kind of a little condescending the way you kind of say it. Like you're almost instructing me like you're my mom. And I was like, I didn't even have any awareness that this was even happening. So it's like I just started changing my approach, how I started talking, and all of a sudden that back and forth banter wasn't happening. Number 3, recognize situations that create anxiety and fear. Don't turn away from what is causing the deer, and I said deer. How about fear, not deer? Oh my God, I just realized, not a deer. Oh my gosh, causing the fear and anxiety. It's not a deer. Lean into it and try to understand why you are feeling this, okay? You may have to dive deep to learn more about yourself and your reactions to deal with this. But if you can acknowledge the fear you have rather than denying it or attempting to beat it senselessly, you have already accomplished a lot. So we need to recognize, why are all of these things coming up? Where is all this anxiety and fear coming from? I know, if you remember when we talked in our workshop and I brought up dread. Do you remember how I told you how a perspective needs to change, the perspective on dread and how dread exists? And for me, the dread, doesn't exist anymore, but Sundays used to I dread Sundays, because Sundays, by the time I hit noon, from noon on, all this anxiety started to come up. So I literally had to for me to now create these internal boundaries boundaries within myself, that dread and that anxiety and that fear doesn't exist, I actually have to start recognizing why it's even there. So I did. I had to do a little, and you know what? A lot of it came from growing up as a kid and going to school on the Monday. And, you know, there was like I went to 10 different schools before I hit high school. So I was always the new kid. So there was a constant, like, always trying to, like, you know, be that new kid and not be that new kid. So that dread existed for me. That anxiety existed because I was always the new kid, right? So I realized that now that anxiety and fear had transpired into my adulthood, and I am no longer in school. I am no longer the new kid, and yet I still have all this anxiety. So I had to, like, figure that out, that this was a past thing that was causing all this anxiety and fear, and that boundary existed for me. What was that? Liz, was that you?
I have a question.
Yeah.
It is me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I
I have a question. So you can hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So I hear what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying. But when we're teaching these workshops, I think it would be very helpful if we provided people with some tools to overcome that, because the Sunday night anxiety thing is a very real thing, right? It's been documented. There's been radio shows about it. So what are some practical tools that we can give to people to help them to overcome that?
So a lot of those tools we've already gone through. Like, if you think about number one, journaling right there, emotional journaling. So that's the number one tool that we gave before we started all of this. So a perfect thing. So if I'm like the dread and anxiety and I figured this out, I did emotional journaling to figure that out. I had to go back. I had to search. I had to, like, where does this come from? Like, why does this exist in my life? Why do I hate Sundays so much? When was the first time I can ever remember I hated Sundays? Journaling is a perfect practice for that. That's an excellent practice for it. And that's why it's number one. And journaling, you will constantly, through all of these workshops, and it was already been brought up in here, how journaling will help this. It's like constantly give them that tool to get here. Also, anything that we went through in perspective is those tools in the perspective workshop, always bring those tools into the workshops that we're in now. Does that help, Liz? Amazing. Okay, so number 4, become aware of the people who provoke emotional responses in you. We are not going to get along with everyone. It's just not going to happen. However, if this response is happening regularly, it may be time to turn the tables and look at why people bring out such a negative response in you. They say what we need to learn. They say what we need to learn is given to us. Being aware of this response can help us to achieve better relationships. So we want to constantly, we all know who those people are. The people that are in our families, that gets our back up like that, all of those people. We need to start becoming aware of that to create better internal boundaries so we're not freaking out every single time this person is here. Okay? And I know for myself in this situation, that emotional response used to come from my mother. And so what boundaries did I implement to do that? 1, geographical distance. I live far away from her. 2, I took 3 years off from her. Time. But I didn't take time out to not deal with it. I took 3 years then to literally discover what it is that this person did to me and how to understand and equip myself with tools to then bring this person back in. And then the moment I brought that person back into my life, I right away made those boundaries with her. This is how we go forward with this relationship, right? So all of these things, so that's why internally we have to take responsibility. And that's why this section is all just on internal boundaries that we need to do. So all of the boundaries at the top are so important for our internal ones, okay? So boundary challenges. Don't you just love it when I give you a challenge? Okay. Here are some things that may add difficulty to your choice to set and strengthen your boundaries. Okay. If you are aware that some of the challenges may occur, you can be better prepared to reinforce your boundaries during challenging times. Okay. So these are all the challenges that are coming into our life. All of these things. So number one is life shifts. Things are always moving, changing, and needing adjustments. Always take time out during these times to draw new lines and remove old ones, okay? So every time your life shifts in some way, and that's why at the very beginning I said, with relationships, they're going to take a life shift, you know, especially with children as they grow up, especially, you know, as your relationship gets, you know, deeper in a personal, Omid is in a brand new relationship now. It's going to constantly shift. You constantly need to adjust on a regular basis, okay? Disagreements is number two. Not all people in your life will agree with where you have drawn your boundaries. They're not. My mother, coming back into my life, does not agree with the boundaries that I have created and continually keeps pushing them. And every time she puts them, I remind her of the boundaries that are being set, okay? She doesn't agree with the boundaries that I've set because she wants fully in. She's a narcissist. Oh, I don't like this. You're keeping me at arm's length. It drives her crazy. But these are the boundaries that I have created for me. It is necessary for healthy relationships to discuss and learn to respect each other's boundaries. Misunderstandings can occur when others have weak boundaries and therefore cannot respect yours. That's happening with my mom. She has weak boundaries. Okay? You have not adequately paved the way for a new boundary through respectful notification and discussion. So, boundaries have been set, but you haven't told the other person. You haven't let them know what these boundaries are, and disagreements are going to come up because of that. Okay? So we need to be very clear with what our boundaries are. Others only support your growth if they do not have to make adjustments. Again, this is where disagreements are going to start happening. Okay? They're not. And I have to tell you, like there's been in so many ways, like after I went through that really awful breakdown, and then I started the PPA and I started writing and I started being more vulnerable and open with who I was. Not everyone supported that growth. They were like, can't you just go back to the way you were? Why do you have to talk about everything? Why does everything have to be out in the open now with your emotions? Why does this have to exist? So they didn't respect. And what ended up happening is a lot of them just fell away. So they made their own decisions what was going to happen. But so we need to remember that those disagreements are going to happen. You guys are going to start to shift and change and whatever is going to happen. Not everyone's going to agree with it. That's okay. Okay. So number 3, your own pattern and beliefs. Your patterns have been adopted to protect you in times of discomfort. But once the situation is past, you must free yourself and create new boundaries. Okay? So sometimes what happens is things that you put into place to protect yourself, okay, those boundaries, but then all of a sudden what happens is now the situation is okay, right? Now everything's past. Things are starting to shift and change again. Everyone's getting more comfortable. You must free yourself of that boundary and create the new ones that have to go forward, okay? So for instance, if a friend broke your trust, right? If a friend broke your trust, what happens in that situation? A very rigid boundary is created, right? And you keep them at arm's length because you don't trust them. But then over time, you start to talk more, you start to work it out, and the trust comes back, right? In that moment now, it is time for that huge rigid wall to start dissipating a little. So you need to remember that that needs to then shift. That boundary needs to shift, and the new ones that are going to be created for your new friendship where trust is now starting to come back again. So we need to remember, and sometimes this is very hard for people when they've created those boundaries, and that's the only boundaries they've created, even though the relationship has changed, right? So make sure you're always like ebbs and flows in everything that we're doing, okay? So change. When change, when changes have occurred. This is a perfect time to readjust and create new boundaries. Old boundaries may not work with the new changes. So if you have a new position at work, you have just been promoted at work, and now your colleagues that you were working with, you had set boundaries with them. They were your colleagues. It was much more friendlier. You shared a lot more things with them. But now you've been promoted, and now you are their boss. Your boundaries in that change need to shift. You now no longer have the same boundary with that person. Now you're not sharing everything because you are now their boss in a different respect. So boundaries have to shift. And that happens, that's where a lot of people, when they get moved up and promoted, and then what happens is they can't say no, or they don't want to hurt their feelings, because we used to all go to lunch together. We used to share everything, but now we can't. And that's where all of a sudden things are not working out. Okay, so I've got a boundary exercise for you, and everybody's left. Jen, you are the only one left. Oh my God, hello, where is everyone? Oh my God, you're here. Are you enjoying this workshop, Jen?
Oh yeah. Oh yes. Me all over it.
Really? Okay, good. Liz is back. We're just waiting for Andrew. So there is an exercise, Liz and Jen, that I want you guys to try. It's with regards to setting your boundaries. So the number one thing I want you to do, and this is a great exercise to really see where your boundaries even sit, because you may all of a sudden become aware that you need to make better boundaries in some certain situations. Make a list of what you want, but don't yet have in different areas of your life, okay? Make sure to include your work life, home life, relationships, health, finances, spiritually, and any other areas that are important to you. So you're going to list them out, okay? Make a list of what you will never tolerate again in your life. So with regards to your home life, what will you never tolerate again? Okay? In your relationships, in your health, in your finances, spirituality. Sometimes there are a lot of people that don't even know that. They don't even know what I would never tolerate. Number 3, how would you like to strengthen boundaries in various areas of your life? So I want to strengthen my boundaries around health by how? How do you want to do that? Okay. I want to strengthen my boundaries around finances, around your relationships, around fun, all of these. I want you to literally list them all out. How would you like to strengthen them? And this one's hard. Liz is like, oh God, are you kidding me? Did you want to say something, Liz? Or are you good?
No, this is going to be a challenge, but I'm up for it.
Good. It is. It's a boundary exercise. Okay, number 4. Choose 3 of these boundaries that you are willing to set in different areas of your life this week. Commit to making these changes. In some cases, you might have to declare your boundary to someone else, and that's okay. Remember, we bring people in. That is a tool to help us set boundaries, such as, I'm not going to pick you up from work every day. In other cases, you may just take a different action to set your boundary. So that's the thing. These boundaries may be like, you know what? I am not putting away your breakfast dishes anymore. You're going to. If you don't put them away, then they're just going to sit on the counter. I am not. That is a boundary I am setting in my life, whatever it is. Because where are the things? And it starts to strengthen. So the 3 boundaries I will set this week are, and you're going to list those 3. What are these boundaries? A great boundary to set for yourself is the promise to yourself. Set that alarm. Do not snooze it. Make that promise to yourself, set that boundary for yourself, and achieve it. Again, remember, every time we hit that snooze, we are breaking a boundary with ourselves, a promise with ourselves. And if we are able to constantly not keep our promises with ourselves, then what are we doing with everyone else, right? We constantly have to learn to put ourselves first. Our boundaries are the most important. Okay, so I suggest that is the one you guys keep. And it's the hardest one, by the way, because who doesn't love to snooze? But do it for a week. Keep that promise. I'm going to tell you, you are going to feel so accomplished that you kept that with yourself. It will be amazing. Jen, are you going to do it?
Yeah. I'm just laughing because I have 3 different alarms because I know I hit snooze, and I've slept through them before, all of them. Like some of them I don't even realize I hit snooze. Like yeah.
Oh
So
my
it's a
God.
challenge.
It's such, but it's a great boundary to keep for yourself. It's a great promise to keep for yourself. Liz, are you like, whoa, this is giving me a little anxiety? Are you up for the challenge? How are you feeling?
Heidi, I'm always up for a challenge. You know me. Challenge me and I'm all in. Yes, I'm all in. 100%.
Good. I cannot wait. We are checking back in next week. I would love for you guys to, what I think would be great is when you go through this exercise and you come up with your 3, I'd love for you guys to share it. We have our PPA Facebook group, our chat. I'd love for you guys to share it, depending on if they're super personal ones, I'm not going to be offended. Of course, that's a boundary with yourself. But if you are okay to share it, and we can discuss this next week, because this is a massive challenge, guys. It's a big one. You are looking at all aspects of your life, and you are what are you doing? The 3 S's. You are speaking up, you are stepping up, and you are standing back. It's like, you've got to do it. Stand up and step back. You guys can do this. It's amazing. Okay, Andrew, what about you? How are you feeling about this challenge?
Can you please give me 1 and 3 again? I was here, but I didn't write it down, so I didn't.
Oh, no worries. Okay, so number 1 is make a list of what you want, but don't yet have in different areas of your life. It's the very last page in your workshop, okay?
I don't ever print everything off because my printer's been out of ink for 3 or 4 years. So I write down all of my notes.
No worries. So you're going to make a list of what you want, but don't yet have in different areas of your life. So I want you to look at every aspect. I want you to look at your work life, home life, relationships, health, finances, spirituality, and any other areas that are important to you, okay? Number 2 is make a list of what you will never tolerate again in your life. In all of those aspects, what will you never tolerate again? Like, go there. There may be a few things. There may be a few things where I was like, I'm not tolerating this anymore. You know what? I am fed up with it. I'm tired of arguing about this. I'm tired of telling that person to stop this, whatever it is, okay? Then number 3, how would you like to strengthen boundaries in all of these areas? So you're like, I want to strengthen my boundaries around my health, my finances, my relationship. What are these things? Okay.
Got it.
And then choose 3 of these boundaries that you will this week set in different areas of your life that you're going to commit to. So 3 of them.
There's only 3, so do I have to commit to all of them?
Well, the thing is, in all of these aspects in your life, you are going to, but this week, you're only going to do 3. Because listen, you can't do them all at once. See, that's too overwhelming and you'll just give up. So that's why I'm like, challenge yourself with 3 this week. 3 areas where you are going to create these boundaries, where you're going to speak up, stand up, and step back. Okay? You can do it. There we go, guys. Boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. We are done. Number 9.
Thank you, Heidi.
You're very welcome. How are you feeling? How are you feeling, Jen?
Good. It's a lot. It was big.
This is a big one.
Yeah, I want to work on it.
Yes, of course you are. That's why you're here. Andrew, what about you? How are you feeling?
You know, I'm still riding the wave on Victoria's book for self-culture as far as boundaries go. I made a lot of really drastic changes and steps towards a lot of the things that she's given me most recently.
Good.
And having that right on top of my head is making me work on it diligently, right? There have been a lot of really big changes that I've made as far as friendship circles and boundaries go, what I allow and what I don't allow. I've always thought I had pretty big shoulders and I could pretty much carry whatever I needed to, but it turns out my heart isn't as big as my shoulders. You know, there are some there are some old hurts there that I've allowed myself to step in my own shit, and I don't want to do what I can to avoid it and help teach other people to do the same thing.
Exactly. It's so true. It's like, and that's the thing, especially, you know, relationships that have been with us for a very long time. And, you know, it's amazing how we allow so many boundaries to be crossed that, you know, if a new person was to come in, no way in hell would we ever let that boundary be crossed.
Absolutely.
You know, we have such a relationship, we have such an investment in it, and it's intimate, that we allow people to cross these boundaries, and it's not acceptable. And yeah, Andrew, this is amazing. This is so amazing that you're able to like really start changing some of the boundaries and changing your life, because it radically shifts your life. When you get a hold of boundaries and you start creating the healthy boundaries in your life, it's ridiculous how your life shifts.
Well, I would reflect on a couple of things that I learned this week, and one of them was how powerful people's suggestion can be on us from when we're young. Mm-hmm. Specifically, this was a father's influence on a person. And one thing I became aware of this week is most often, I'll listen. I'm a listener. I don't feel I need to step into a conversation. Even if I can add something, I'll step back. I won't contribute. And I realized that the initial incident of this was my dad once saying to me, if you keep your mouth shut and listen, you'd learn something. And that's been something I've carried my whole life, you know. But I'm starting to realize that I have a few things that I can share if I come out from behind myself, right? So it's something that I'm making a serious effort on an old boundary for.
Good.
It's just, you know, adapting to that. And
that's such an incredible awareness that you were able to work through.
It truly is. And, you know, I was talking with a friend today about how awareness, you know, it helps us to delete and recreate boundaries as we move. And like you said already, that is always something that we work on. You know, sometimes we have to reflect on some of the boundaries that we have set again, as you mentioned, and reestablish boundaries, because some of those things were given to us by other people. A meme I read today was, don't let someone cut you and then bleed on everyone else.
Yes.
You know, so that's my 2 cents.
No, I love your 2 cents. I love that analogy too. That's so good. Wow. No, amazing. Wow. Great job, guys. Go and set some amazing boundaries and have fun this week. And if you're ready, share them. Share them with the group so we can all, you know, if you need to lean on us or you need someone to hold you accountable, we're all here.
Thanks,
Heidi.
You're very welcome. Have a
Good
great
day.
Bye, Andrew.
Bye, guys.